start with Vladimir Putin going to Tehran. What is the strategic significance of that potentially?
Well, the main message is that Putin is not going to give up on Ukraine, and he's going to reach out to whatever allies he may have to try to get help in that effort. And I just think it sends a very important signal to the United States and our allies that we cannot afford to give up either. It's very important that Putin and Russia not have their way in Ukraine. And the United States and our allies and Ukraine itself are standing in the way of that happening. And that's important. We've got to continue on the effort to make sure that Russia does not succeed.
We've heard about these armed drones, supposedly, that Iran may be supplying to Russia. Is that important in and of itself, or is it more of a symbol?
Well, it's an important weapon. Make no mistake about it. Drones are very effective as a weapon. And we've seen the Ukrainians use drones, and I'm sure that the Russians have used drones as well. And so these additional drones are going to give Russia some capability. But that's why it's important for the United States and our allies to continue to provide arms, to continue to provide both the medium and long range weaponry so that we can hit Russian targets wherever they are. That remains the main strategy if we're going to be able to push Russia back.
There's the armament that you described that we're supplying to Ukrainians. There's also the sanctions that we imposed. And by the way, in a form, Russia is imposing sanctions right back. They're threatening, as you know, natural gas supplies to Western Europe. And of course, there's been an embargo on grain. How effective are the Russian countermeasures?
Well, Russia's learned a lot about sanctions over the years, and they found ways to try to get around some of them. These are tough. These are tough sanctions, and they have impacted on the Russian economy. There's no question about it. And it's not so easy for Putin to be able to get around some of these sanctions in the process. But they're going to try to continue to do that. There's no question about it. The United States and our allies have to continue to tighten up on sanctions with regards to Russia. We are in this. We have made it very clear that we are going to confront Russia and apply not only sanctions, but arms and reinforcement of our NATO allies as a main message to Russia that they are not going to have their way. We cannot afford to back away from all those efforts.
Mr. Secretary, whenever you have allies, the effect of some of these may be disproportionate on some versus others. And specifically when it comes to natural gas from Russia, that won't affect the United States very much, but it may well affect Western Europe and particularly Germany. The things that we can do to try to hold the alliance together when Germany, for example, is getting hurt worse than we are?
I think we've got to look at a whole series of options to try to provide gas as a backup to the possibility that the Russians may very well cut off that supply. I mean, they've shut down the pipeline for maintenance, but there's some concern that they may totally shut it down. We have got to be prepared for that. Both the United States and our allies have to be developing backup plans to be able to supply Europe with needed gasoline supplies. That is critical. We are in a war, whether we like it or not. We are in a war, and we are going to have to take steps to basically counter whatever Russia tries to do.
No question that that war, started by Russia, without any doubt, has really thrust Western Europe back into the center of the agenda. At the same time, China remains very, very important to the United States over the long term and the medium term, for that matter. Our colleague John Micklethwait, the editor-in-chief here, actually had a chance to talk with Henry Kissinger, someone you know well, about his new book that's just come out. And he asked him about U.S. relations with China. And part of what Henry had to say is we don't want a hegemony there. At the same time, we can't have too much confrontation. This is a little bit of what Henry told John.
It is, of course, important to prevent Chinese or any other country's hegemony, but that it's a permanent assignment, that is not something that can be achieved by endless confrontations.
So you heard more about endless confrontations between the United States and China. Are we engaged in endless confrontation? Have we gone too far in the confrontation? Is there another way?
Well, I would hope that we could achieve an important balance with China by number one, making very clear that there are lines that China cannot cross, and that the United States will do everything necessary, working with our allies, to prevent them from further aggression in the South China Sea, in Taiwan, and in other areas. But at the same time, once we've defined where those lines are, I think there's an opportunity here to engage in diplomacy and dialogue with China. I think that is important, but you have to do it from a position of strength. You cannot do it from a position of weakness, and that's the difference here. If the United States and our allies make clear where the lines are, then I think it can open up opportunities for dialogue.
Is there a path that you can see from all your vast experience to avoid this being a zero-sum game? Because I think sometimes President Xi thinks that the United States basically has as its strategy in China to hold it back, to hold China back. So a lot of people in the United States think that for China to win, the United States has to lose. Is there a way that both sides can win?
Yeah, I believe that can be the case. China is a strong economy. We're part of a global world. I think that this world has plenty of room for competition between China and the United States and others as well. That is really the kind of globalism we ought to be seeking, which is one of having strong competition with China and others as far as trade is concerned, and yet maintaining a relationship and having a constant dialogue. Look, there are going to be areas we don't agree with. There are going to be areas we're going to have to confront China. But at the same time, there are areas where we can work together. And I think we ought to be trying to explore those opportunities as well.
In order to make this all work, Mr. Secretary, whether it's with respect to Europe and Russia or whether it's with respect to China, are we going to have to look at a permanently elevated level of defense spending?
Again, you've got to do this from a position of strength. And obviously, maintaining a strong military is critical to our ability to say to the world that the United States remains the strongest military power on the face of the earth. At the same time, you have to have strong diplomacy. It isn't just military power that's going to do it. You've got to be able to have strong diplomacy operating with strong military power to kind of be able to work with the rest of the world in order to achieve, hopefully, peace and prosperity. Look, I don't think we have to be in constant confrontation with everybody in the world. That's simply not going to work, and it's no answer to living in the 21st century. But ultimately, what we do have to do is to be strong and then build relationships with our allies around the world, and then use those alliances in order to work with our adversaries. That has to be the key to the 21st century.